The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
And President-elect Biden has now received a majority of electoral votes needed to win the presidency.
As expected, Joe Biden received 306 electoral votes, Donald Trump 232. And legal experts say after today's vote, the ability to change the result in court is gone.
And the Constitution makes today both the day and the last day.
Today, the Electoral College cementing President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Do you want me to read this now? Some breaking news. California putting President-elect Joe Biden over the edge. Joe Biden's official win now in the Electoral College.
If there was any doubt Joe Biden is the president-elect, and there really wasn't any, it was definitively erased today with the vote of the Electoral College.
You know, in this battle for the soul of America, democracy prevailed.
There you go. The media have spoken again. This time they've got the full backing of the Electoral College. Or do they? We'll get into that here in just a moment. We thank you for joining us on today's program. You're listening to the Trumpet Daily Radio Show, and there's so much to get to. Attorney General Barr, he turned in his resignation letter last night. Lots of positive things to say. Whether or not he was pressured to resign, I guess we don't know for sure. President Trump had some very nice tweets about him, and then he had some very nice things to say about the Trump administration in his resignation letter as well. He'll be in office only through to the start of next week. So, like I say, lots and lots to get to. You heard the montage there. And as far as they're concerned, it's over and done with. It is now official. You heard the one say that there's no more chance to do anything in court even. That's what the media would have us to believe. And yet, really, one of the big stories, one huge development from yesterday came when seven Republican legislatures, they put together alternate states or slates of electors, I guess you could say. And as the president has continually said, this is a contested election. There should be no votes to certify. There should be no votes at the Electoral College. And so since it went forward in those swing states, the Republicans and the Trump campaign has been working on this for weeks. They've been going at it on all fronts. Obviously, there's the legal challenges in court. Obviously, there have been the hearings, some of those Republican state legislature hearings. And then now in 7 states, Nevada, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and even New Mexico. The Trump campaign just filed a suit in New Mexico yesterday. So all 7 of those states, they've put together an alternate slate of electors that are going to be submitted to Congress as well. So what does this mean? Well, I'll read from an article here in just a second that I think explains it fairly well. But the simple truth of this is that it gives President Trump more time to overturn this election steal. It gives the Trump campaign more time to carry out its goal in court at the state legislature level. And of course, it's something that obviously doesn't happen every 2 or 4 years. There is some historical precedent to it. I think it's happened on a smaller level back in the 1960s, I believe, and before that, going back to the Civil War era. But this is, as Bernie Carrick tweeted out, this is historic and unparalleled for 7 state Republican legislatures to do this. Now, we have 3 weeks until the January 6th meeting in Congress, where they meet to, I think, accept or approve the electors. But as was pointed out yesterday by one of the Trump spokespersons, the only official date is the day of the inauguration. That's the one date that's embedded into the Constitution, January the 20th. So I'll come to that in just a second. First, let me just play you what The Pennsylvania Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, really despises President Trump. And here's how he reacted to the Republicans in his state carrying on with this, as he said, this ridiculous charade to send in this alternate slate of electors. This is AG Josh Shapiro, clip 9.
They have absolutely no authority to affect the outcome of the Electoral College. No legislator here in Pennsylvania has any authority. I've been stating that as a point of legal fact for months. These 20 electoral votes that were cast today for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will stand, and they will be sworn in as the president and vice president on January 20th. Period. End of sentence. If these enablers want to continue to suck up to the sitting president of the United States to score points, I suppose they can do it, but it will have absolutely no legal effect and no bearing on the outcome.
It just reminds me of that Ralph Helge quote. I read it a few weeks ago, going back to 2002, when he was out there telling people, look, that little church, the Philadelphia Church of God, they've lost. There's nowhere else that they could go. He said this, legally, there's no place else for him to go, speaking of my father, on this issue. I don't know how else I can say it. PCG's only right is to stand before the bar of justice and have damages assessed against them and attorney's fees for the wrong that it has committed. So there's nowhere else to go, which factually was not even true. But we certainly were about to go up for damages before court, and yet God intervened. And that never did happen. And we got all of those publications. We got all of those books by Herbert Armstrong. And so here are the pundits. Here is the Attorney General of Pennsylvania saying that's going to have no legal effect on anything. It's official. It's done. It's over. Now let me read to you what it says. This is a Reuters article. Reuters, okay? And this is before the election. This is Reuters talking about what would happen if there are, as they say, dueling electors. You know, what happens if the Democrats send electors and the Republicans send electors to Congress? It says both sets of electors would meet and vote on December 14th. So that's what happened yesterday. And in some cases, like in Michigan, they didn't even let the Republicans into the state legislature, the House. So they had to do it outside. I think they did it outside in Nevada as well. But they met on December 14th, both groups in these 7 states. It says, and the competing results would be sent to Congress. So that brings us up to the January 6th date. It says here, which set of electors would prevail? Both chambers of Congress could accept the same slate of electors, which would almost certainly put the matter to rest. So if it gets there, the Congress of the United States in D.C., if it gets there and the Senate and the House both accept one slate of electors, then that's that. It says here, the chambers could also split, which is more likely if the Republicans can retain control of the Senate and Democrats hold on to their House majority. It says further on, if lawmakers cannot agree on a set of electors, the country will find itself in uncharted territory. See, this is all possible. Reuters is just explaining the scenarios, and yet you have Josh Shapiro and all the pundits saying yesterday, it's over. It's over. I think Jake Tapper said anyone with a brain cell, anyone with a brain cell knows this is over. It's not over. It's far from over. It says academics have sketched out several scenarios. Under one, Pence, as president of the Senate, could throw out both sets of a state's electors. Another contemplates that the House of Representatives would end up choosing between Biden and Trump. There's even a scenario in which the Speaker of the House, currently Democrat Nancy Pelosi, could become acting president. And I think there's scenarios where she could be acting president for a short time until this gets resolved, meaning that it could even go beyond January 20th. If it's not finally resolved and settled in court. It says, would the U.S. Supreme Court get involved? The Supreme Court may be called upon to interpret the Electoral College Act to break any deadlock. Multiple scenarios. put together by Reuters, the left-wing Reuters. And yet Josh Shapiro, an attorney, he's the attorney general. He knows there's a lot of different ways that this could be overturned. And yet there he is, quick to intimidate, rushing to the microphone, saying this is a ridiculous charade. There's no way. This will have absolutely no legal effect and no bearing on the outcome. And even as he's saying that, you have the Trump campaign with the victory that it pulled out in Wisconsin. I'll come to that in just a second. Wisconsin, the Supreme Court there basically saying it was illegal for the governor and those state election officials to change the rules. That's what they did. That seems to open up a door for the Trump campaign. Even as the Electoral College turns in its votes, all of this is happening in the background. Well, the fake president-elect, Joe Biden, he was quick to rush to the microphone last night as well. And it was hardly a message about healing and coming together. Instead, he came across as pretty arrogant and divisive, really going after conservatives, after Republicans. Here's a little bit from what Joe Biden said last night, clip 2.
In America, when questions are raised about the legitimacy of any election, those questions are resolved through the legal processes. And that's precisely what happened here. The Trump campaign brought dozens and dozens and dozens of legal challenges to test the result. They were heard again and again. And each of the time they were heard, they were found to be without merit. And yet, none of this has stopped baseless claims about the legitimacy of the results. Even more stunning, 17 Republican attorneys general and 126 Republican members of the Congress actually signed on to a lawsuit filed by the state of Texas.
And so he points out how that was didn't have standing in the Supreme Court, but all of these Republicans that joined on, and he's just shocked by this. It's over. It's over. It's gone through dozens of challenges in court. And so this is all over and done with. And by the way, just as an aside here, there's many different ways that this can go, as I said earlier. But you look at even his health, quite a few people have commented on how he didn't look so good. He was coughing quite a lot. And then he just kind of stumbled off stage basically at the end. This is a man who's just showing his age, and he didn't have much of a campaign to speak of, as we know. And now he's just being held up as this puppet. He's the front, basically, for Obama and company, lurking in the background, pushing the buttons, anything and everything that they can do to just get him across the finish line. And then whatever happens, the media, they don't care. It's all about getting rid of Donald Trump. They're not really interested in his physical or even mental state. It doesn't even concern them. They cover it up. What was it that this clip, by the way, the clip of him saying he's got this extensive voter fraud organization? It was just making the rounds on some of the conservative sites yesterday and the day before, I believe. And we were playing it on this show a couple weeks ago. You remember the Joe Obama montage. Play that for them, clip 4.
Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our administration, the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
People would ask me, knowing what you know now, do you wish like you had a third term? And I used to say, you know what, if I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. I'd be fine with that.
When we disagree, it'll be just like, so far, it's been just like when Barack and I did. It's in private. She'll say, I think we should do A, B, C, or D. And I'll say, I like A, don't like B and C. And it's go, okay. And like I told Barack, if I reach something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign.
It's all playing out, just like they've said when they accidentally, or however they came about saying the silent part out loud last night when he was following on the news from the Electoral College. When he wasn't really condemning the Republicans and the Trump administration and the legal efforts to expose this fraud, he talked about lowering the temperature and coming together as a nation. Here's clip 8.
We need to work together to give each other a chance to lower the temperature. And most of all, we need to stand in solidarity as fellow Americans.
Just like they did 4 years ago, to bring the country together, to lower the temperature, and to work with the incoming Trump administration. You know, you compare, just to consider Attorney General Barr's resignation, if you compare that, suppose, okay, so he has some last-minute differences here with the President of the United States, and the President obviously has been critical of him not exposing the Hunter Biden scandal before the election, and then not going after the voter fraud as much as he should. But for the most part, Bill Barr was there with this president and served his country. And you compare that with the Attorney General and the head of the CIA, Brennan, and Clapper, and Comey, and all those people in those last few weeks before the inauguration of Donald Trump, and what they were doing and plotting. Sally Yates, she was there as a plant. So was Comey. They were the carryovers when Loretta Lynch left and Brennan left. They didn't leave early. They stayed right there until the inauguration because they were plotting and scheming to bring down the incoming president and his administration. Bill Barr didn't do that. And really, if you think about the incoming administration, just if we play along and go with this fake presidency, look at what would a special counsel, if what's happened in this Biden family does not warrant or justify a special counsel, what would? I mean, this would actually be a legitimate special counsel investigation, quite unlike the Bob Mueller one. I'll get more to the Bill Barr resignation a little bit later, but just coming back to what Josh Shapiro said and what so many of the pundits are saying. Yesterday in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you have this ruling, 4-3, saying that Governor Evers, with all these other election officials, they didn't have the authority. They didn't have the authority before the election to expand the definition of indefinitely confined. There were like hundreds of thousands of Wisconsin voters that suddenly fell into that category. Now, if you're an elderly person that can't get around and you're in an elderly care center, or you're infirmed in some way, that's what the law is there for. They want you to be able to vote. But this year, they were just flooded with people who were suddenly indefinitely confined, quite unlike previous elections. And we've gone through some of the percentages before. Wisconsin's election rules, they're pretty strict. And so this was one way where the radical left was able to get around the rules and get quite a few extra votes. It says here, the state's highest court ruled only those voters whose own age, physical illness, or infirmity makes them homebound, could declare themselves indefinitely confined. So, as I say, this comes right at the time, the same day that the Wisconsin state legislature votes for Joe Biden. And so the Republicans, in response to that, they came out with their slate of electors to vote for Donald Trump. Now, there was another case that the Trump campaign lost 4-3 in Wisconsin as well, respecting those contested ballots. But this ruling, the other ruling, of course, the one that the media is not going to cover, the other ruling, it would appear to at least open the door to go in now and find, well, okay, which ones were not indefinitely confined? And if so, those are going to be declared invalid, or could be. Listen to Stephen Miller just talking about all of these slates of electors that the Republicans were voting for in these swing states. This is one of the president's assistants speaking on Fox and Friends yesterday morning, clip 1.
The only date in the Constitution is January 20th. So we have more than enough time to right the wrong of this fraudulent election result and certify Donald Trump as the winner of the election. As we speak today, an alternate slate of electors in the contested states is going to vote, and we're going to send those results up to Congress. This will ensure that all of our legal remedies remain open. That means that if we win these cases in the courts, that we can direct that the alternate slate of electors be certified. The state legislatures in Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania can do the same. And likewise, Congress has that opportunity as well to do the right thing. If you just cured 3 simple constitutional defects, Donald Trump's the winner of this election. Whether it's the signature matching in Georgia that was illegally changed as a result of a consent decree without the legislature's approval, or whether it's the hundreds of thousands of improperly cast ballots in Wisconsin, absentee voters who never actually submitted the request for an absentee ballot, or whether you're talking in Pennsylvania, the clear equal protection violation when Democrat ballots were cured in advance of Election Day and Republican ballots weren't. These are just 3 of hundreds of violations that we've documented, and those 3 violations alone make Donald Trump the winner of the 2020 election.
There are different pathways, in other words, and there is, as he said, more than enough time to get this done, to right this wrong. 5 weeks now. 5 weeks. And think of what's turned up in the last 5 or 6 weeks. In terms of evidence, 5 more weeks of digging and exposing. He gave you 3 examples. Georgia, for example, that they illegally changed through a consent decree the requirement for signature matching. And then yesterday, what did we hear coming out of Georgia? This Secretary of State, this weak Secretary of State, intimidated by Stacey Abrams, he announces, from his office, he announces that they're going to have a signature match audit in Cobb County. Now, the worst of it, as far as the crime and the corruption, the worst of it was in Fulton County. That's where the supposed water main break. And then DeKalb County, right next door. But at least it's something. This is a state that has resisted and resisted and resisted. And finally, this Secretary of State, coming under intense pressure, no doubt. And also, I played the clip for you yesterday. I'll play it again here in a moment. You've got Stacey Abrams. Here, this runoff is coming up on January the 5th. And those 2 Republican Senate hopefuls, Loeffler and Perdue, they're getting worried because their numbers are tanking right now. And then you've got Stacey Abrams out on TV bragging. She's bragging about how tens of thousands of new voters, new Democrat voters, even since November 3rd. This was Stacey Abrams on the Sunday shows, clip 5.
Democrats are prepared to win this election because this is the first runoff where we have the level of investment and engagement that it takes to win a runoff. We know from the numbers that we're in a good place. 1.2 million absentee ballots have been requested thus far. And just to put that into context, 1.3 million were requested for all of the general election. And of that 1.2 million, 85,000 of those applications are from voters who did not vote in the general election.
Just wrap your mind around these numbers for a second. They were able to steal the presidential election in Georgia on November 3rd because of a record high turnout, because of a record high number of mail-in ballots, because of how that opened the way for them to cheat on a mass scale. That was just 5-6 weeks ago. I heard someone on a program yesterday talk about the efforts of Republicans in the lead up to the presidential election to try to attract new voters from Republican precincts. Their campaign to get out the vote, the Republican campaign, they were able to get 125,000 new Republican voters over the span of 7 months. 7 months in the lead up to November 3rd. Stacey Abrams has added 85, the deadline, that was last week, December the 7th. So she basically has added 85,000 new Democrat voters in 4 weeks' time. 4 weeks. And you know where she's getting them. Raffensperger's own office has been investigating all of these cases. He has, as he said, he has direct evidence of dead people, out-of-staters coming back to vote. As we read yesterday, college students from out of state that are in Georgia that are being told, look, just change your address for a few weeks so that you can vote. All of this illegal, fraudulent activity. And then she's out there on TV because they never get caught. They never, ever get caught. So they've rigged one already on a mass scale. So, hey, let's do it again. And that's what they're doing. And finally, Loeffler and Perdue are saying, hang on a second, we're not the strongest Republican supporters of Donald Trump, but if we don't stop this, we're not going to win our Senate seats. So now they're developing a bit of a backbone. Raffensperger is developing a backbone. Now they want to fight, at least in Cobb County. Now, Biden won that county comfortably, not as comfortable as it was in Fulton and DeKalb. But Raffensperger says that this signature audit, this is something the president's been calling for from day one. It's going to take 2 weeks now. So is this, Josh Shapiro, is this finally and forever resolved? Is there nowhere else that this can go? Georgia right now is in the midst of a signature audit for the next 2 weeks. To say nothing of all the cases that are in court. In Michigan yesterday, you had this lots of news coming out of a lot of states yesterday. The Electoral College day, the supposed deadline day. But in Michigan yesterday morning, this judge ordered, previous to this, he had ordered this forensic audit of the Dominion voting machines in Antrim County. This was where those 6,000 votes had been flipped to Biden. You know, it always goes from Trump to Biden. It's never in the other direction. So this judge, to his credit, said, all right, let's examine these Dominion machines. And so this independent organization comes in, examines or audits or conducts this forensic audit. They come out with the results at the middle of last week. And then the Secretary of State in Michigan argued for those results to be kept confidential. They didn't want the results to be released. Why would they want this if they didn't have anything to hide? Well, finally, the side that conducted the audit got those facts, the summary, the conclusions released just yesterday. And here again, it says here, well, if I could find the direct quote, the report says, we conclude that the Dominion voting system is intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors to create systemic fraud and influence election results. That's the conclusion of this study, this examination. it showed how that these machines were designed to contest ballots, basically, and to force them into this adjudication stage, as it's called. This was where an election official then would be, without any supervision, the official would then determine, if the machine couldn't, who the person voted for. The report said that 68% of the ballots in this county went to adjudication. 68%! So you're supposed to, I guess it's supposed to do it all automatically, and it kept spitting them out saying this one can't be determined. And so it was basically the officials without any poll watchers there. The report says this: the allowable election error rate established by the Federal Election Commission guidelines is of 1 in 250,000 ballots. That's 0.0008%. That's how much the FEC allows in the way of computer error. We observed an error rate of 68%. Did you hear anything about this in the news yesterday? Not if you were watching the news. But you can see why the president goes straight to the people with his Twitter account. He reaches 88 million people. So 88 million people know about this. The media, they know about this. They're following President Trump's Twitter account, to be sure. They know about this study. They know about this report. They just ignore it. It's like they did with the Hunter laptop. They just ignore it. When it doesn't suit their purpose, when it doesn't help them fulfill their agenda, carry out their agenda, they just ignore it. The report says the system intentionally generates an enormously high number of ballot errors. The electronic ballots are then transferred for adjudication. The intentional errors lead to bulk adjudication of ballots with no oversight, no transparency, and no audit trail. This leads to voter or election fraud. Based on our study, we conclude that the Dominion voting system should not be used in Michigan. That's what Texas concluded last year or a couple years ago. Based on their study, we're not using those machines in Texas. The most secure election in the history of the United States. That's what Chris Krebs said. Perfect election. This report also noted that the logs for the adjudication process went missing. The logs went missing. There was some kind of attempt to cover up some of the information, missing logs and so on. The report says that on November 21st, a user attempted to zero out election results. This is direct proof of an attempt to tamper with evidence. And how much has that gone on all over the country as these Dominion machines and these election officials have gotten nervous? Boy, what if there's an audit? They just announced in Arizona yesterday that, or maybe it was early this morning, that they would be auditing another forensic audit for the Dominion machines in Maricopa County. That's where the cheating happened in Arizona. This is from the Epic Times. It says, an Arizona state chairman on Monday announced he will order through a subpoena officials in the state's largest county to audit their voting machines and software. Maricopa County officials told legislators during a 6-hour public hearing that they wanted to conduct an audit, but were advised that they couldn't by lawyers because of ongoing litigation. The Times says, if such an audit showed that the election results were incorrect, that could help convince members of Congress to file objections to Arizona's electoral votes. Yes, that could happen. Yes, that is possible. Yes, we've still got 3 weeks before January 6th, 5 weeks before the inauguration. It's far from over. Never mind what Josh Shapiro said in the spirit of Ralph Helge. It's far from over. You know, it's interesting. I mentioned Chris Krebs. He's it's a perfect election. He's the one that the president fired. 9 days after the election, I believe it was, 9 days, he comes out and says, yeah, everything was perfect. And then look at what we're hearing about Dominion. It's like President Trump said the other day, we don't even know who's behind that company. And the company, the people have disappeared. I saw a headline where the CEO or the guy heading up that company's finally going to testify somewhere. They've been in hiding. They've been closing offices. They've been on the run. Here comes Chris Krebs, just a few days after the election, says, yeah, I'm over cybersecurity with the government. Everything was perfect. Everything was just totally perfect. And then you've got all these problems, these glitches from state to state. And then yesterday you have this big reveal about that company, SolarWind Orion, and how that the government had to send out this emergency decree, this directive, saying, look, anybody that's connected to this company, there's been a cyber attack. The system's been hacked. SolarWind's Orion, it's probably new to you, but evidently it's used by hundreds of thousands of companies. It's used by every department in the United States Department of Defense. So here our government's hacked. And, oh, by the way, Dominion voting systems, they also use this outfit. SolarWind Orion, Financial Times said yesterday, this is one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks of recent years. One of the most sophisticated in recent years. This is all happening. Whether or not it's connected to Dominion, we don't know for sure. This company, by the way, I think they're in Texas, they were raided yesterday by the FBI. Or at least, I don't know if a raid is the appropriate term to use. But these are stories happening in and around the most secure election in the history of the United States. You've got all the fraud and the corruption leading up to the Senate runoff. You've got the direct evidence Raffensperger has about Stacey Abrams groups and all those people trying to get dead people to vote. You've got this cyber attack. Epoch Times said this yesterday. SolarWinds, an American company that develops software to help businesses manage their networks and computer systems, has been the victim of hacking for months. And according to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that would be Chris Krebs' former department. He's the one that headed it up, CISA. And he had a lot of tweeting going on yesterday as he was talking about this event. And of course, quickly saying, hey, this has nothing to do with Dominion now. Don't connect Dominion with SolarWind Orion. Because remember, on this side, the most perfect election in history. Oh, yes, for months, all of these government agencies were being hacked. But that's totally separate. That's a totally different story. Don't combine the two. It says CISA issued an emergency directive on December 13th, so that would be Sunday night, instructing all federal agencies to check their networks for signs of compromise and to disconnect SolarWind's products immediately. It says it's reported that hackers gained access to the U.S. Commerce Department and the Treasury Department through the software. Hackers are just getting in all over the place, but they sure can't get into Dominion. No. Oh, no. Secure. When you think Dominion, that is secure. The most secure in history. It says, according to FireEye, a cybersecurity firm, the hackers gained access by inserting malware into software updates for the SolarWinds Orion software. FireEye first raised the alarm about the hacking on December 8th. It says, and another company that uses the compromised software has been the subject of concern. According to a Dominion Voting Systems webpage, Dominion uses SolarWinds software. I mean, for all we know, this hack may have been just for the election alone. We'll learn a lot more in the months ahead. There'll be investigations and those kinds of things. The more time that you give to the Trump campaign to right this wrong, the more corruption is being exposed. The more is being revealed. Chris Krebs of perfect election fame, he said on Twitter yesterday, as news breaks about what looks to be a pretty large-scale hack, I have the utmost confidence in the CISA government team and other federal partners. I'm sorry I'm not there with them, but they know how to do this. This thing is still early, I suspect. Let's let the pros work it out. Also, hacks of this type take exceptional tradecraft and time. So here he is talking about something that is very serious. And I mean, this could happen, and it goes over the course of a pretty long period. It says on the first, if this is a supply chain attack using trusted relationships, really hard to stop. On the second, I suspect this has been underway for months. Need good detections to find victims. This is Chris Krebs tweeting out his thoughts yesterday. To find victims and determine scope. It says, if you're a SolarWinds customer and use the below product, assume compromise and immediately activate your incident response team. If you're a SolarWinds customer, of which Dominion is, he says, assume compromise. Just assume it. What did he say? What did he say a month ago? This was the most secure election in the history of the United States. When we come back, we'll get into the resignation letter by William Barr and the president's tweet in response. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We'll be right back.
This is KPCG-FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily.
Do you believe the United States of America has been mainly a positive force in the world for most of its history? Do you believe that America was at one time a great nation? The United States of America was founded on many biblical principles that were incorporated into the Constitution. This lent to its success and positive influence in the world. But the America of then is not the America of today. To anyone examining the current state of America, this should be alarming. It has been a great nation in time past and is experiencing a temporary resurgence in these end times, but it will only be exactly that, temporary. Our free booklet, Great Again, will explain America's status. It will prove that God has been intimately involved in the rise and resurgence of America under President Donald Trump. It will also explain why God is saving America temporarily, how He was doing it, and what is yet to come in America. There is a spiritual dimension to America's rise and decline as a superpower. This free booklet will explain this dimension and how God will soon make America truly great again. Request your free copy of our book, Great Again, at our website, thetrumpet.com.
From the Philadelphia Church of God campus in Edstone, England, this is the Trumpet Daily Program with Stephen Flurry.
They cheated like nobody's cheated before, and they got caught. So nobody can go in and say, oh, congratulations on running a good race. They didn't run a good race. They cheated. They dropped hundreds of thousands of ballots. Right. They did things that nobody's ever seen, and we caught them.
But your guys have been unable to prove it as of now. If something happens...
Excuse me. We've proven it, but no judge has had the courage, including the Supreme Court. I am so disappointed in them. No judge, including the Supreme Court of the United States, has had the courage to allow it to be heard. The Supreme Court, all they did is say, we don't have standing. So they're saying essentially that the President of the United States and Texas and these other states, great states, they don't have standing. They didn't go into the evidence.
They didn't look into the evidence. No one really to speak of has yet. How many judges have read the Dominion report that came out yesterday? How many members in the media? Thousands of affidavits, all of these witnesses, videotape even. You notice the emphasis over and again on courage. It's going to take courage to do the right thing. And of course, with each extra day or extra week that the Trump campaign has to plead its case out in the open on Twitter or wherever, more affidavits, more corruption exposed, There's a lot of different ways it can play out. I mentioned those scriptures yesterday in Romans 4 about Abraham and how that he was fully persuaded that God's truth was in fact the truth. He didn't stagger at the promises of God. It says in Romans 4, for Abraham, when hope was gone, hoped on in faith. He hoped on in faith. I heard a commentator say, well, so-and-so quit the administration. It's over. Well, President Trump hasn't quit. His inner circle, they haven't quit. Rudy Giuliani, he didn't quit. They continue fighting. Now, Bill Barr stepped down after a pretty good run. We had quite a few good things to say about him in the Trumpet magazine and how that he exposed the coup attempt, how that the radical left used the Mueller investigation to try to bring down the presidency. And Bill Barr was there fighting alongside his boss through a lot of it. So they were meeting, evidently, they were meeting yesterday about the current state of the 2020 election fraud, which is interesting in and of itself. Bill Barr mentioning that in the first paragraph of his resignation letter. The meeting was over the fraud, the election fraud. And clearly, judging by the president's tweets, he wasn't happy with the Attorney General's position. He obviously wasn't happy with Chris Krebs for saying it was perfectly secure, the most secure in history. So he says in his letter that he's going to be leaving next week. Bill Barr does. And in the course of this letter, it's just a little over a page. But he does a really good job of highlighting some of the accomplishments of the Trump administration. He says, your record, he says to the president, your record is all the more historic because you accomplished it in the face of relentless, implacable resistance. This is someone who understood just how unhinged the radical left really and truly is. Or with respect to that rolling coup early on, he came out of retirement. He came out, or maybe he was still working as an attorney. I don't know exactly. But he was retired from work for the government. And he was moved to act because he saw this relentless, implacable resistance. And yet there's Joe Biden yesterday saying, hey, now we've got to lower the temperature. Now you've just got to surrender. We won this. All the courts are behind us. Who do you think you are, you Republicans, to sign on to that Texas lawsuit? 17 attorneys general? Who do you think you are to resist this? America has spoken. That's the message when they win a fraudulent election. But when they lose, like they did 4 years ago, the resistance began on day one. You have people screaming out in the streets, talking about burning down the White House, killing the president, decapitating the president. The president's Hitler. His supporters are Nazis. That went on for years. This is a historic level of accomplishment, particularly because it's in the face of relentless, implacable resistance, said the Attorney General. Barr wrote that after Trump's 2016 victory, he was immediately, this is a direct quote, he was immediately met by a partisan onslaught against you in which no tactic, no matter how abusive and deceitful, was out of bounds. This is why you just kind of scratch your head with respect to what was happening just before and then, of course, right after the election. because this is a movement that will carry out any and every abusive and deceitful tactic. There's nothing off limits. There's nothing out of bounds the way they view it. And so when people rush to the microphone and they say it was the most perfect in history, the fix is in. They're all part of it. Now, there's some things that can change along the way. And of course, the biggest factor here that we keep coming back to is what God's position is. What does God have to say about America right now? And how will God intervene to save Israel, as it says in 2 Kings 14? But you look at even what happened in Georgia, as I was saying in the first segment. That's a Secretary of State who's compromised, and now, I mean, they're between a rock and a hard place. Oh boy, well, we want to move on from this election that we just had, but now it's looking like we're going to lose the one that's directly ahead of us. Now it looks like the radical left could take over everything. House of Representatives, the Senate, Joe Biden's coming in. We didn't want it to go this far. We didn't want to get beat this bad. Barr says here, the nadir of this campaign was the effort to cripple, if not oust, your administration with frenzied and baseless accusations of collusion with Russia. Why, they talked about voter fraud for 4 years. John Brennan established that before President Trump even came into office, that the Russians not only meddled, they meddled to help Donald Trump for 4 years. This was what President Trump said in response. He said, just had a very nice meeting with Attorney General Bill Barr at the White House. Our relationship has been a very good one. He's done an outstanding job. As per letter, Bill will be leaving just before Christmas to spend the holidays with his family. Deputy Attorney General Jeff Rosen, an outstanding person, will become acting Attorney General. Highly respected Richard Donahue will be taking over the duties of Deputy Attorney General. And then he says, thank you to all. Now, it may be that Bill Barr was planning to leave even before the election. He made John Durham the special counsel, if you recall, regarding the Russia collusion hoax. He made him special counsel in October. So perhaps he was, asked to stay on just to get through the election. We don't know all the details. We don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes. We don't know too much about Jeff Rosen, but if he's anything like Richard Grinnell was when he came in for that temporary stay as a DNI, I believe it was, he came in and did a lot. So maybe this is something the president is orchestrating because he knows he's going to need to shake things up here in the next few weeks. Lots and lots of twists and turns, as I said at the start of the show. Lots of different pathways here. One of our listeners, by the way, talked about how that Texas case, as solid as it was, that was quite the federation of states, and you had all these states joining in. You had all these attorneys generals joining in. You had all of these congressmen lending their support as well. And given what it says in 2 Kings 14 about God, there's no help. There's no help. In some ways, it looked like the Texas case was even too strong of a case, as one of our listeners noted. It'll be fascinating to watch these next few weeks to see how and where and when God will intervene. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We thank you for joining us on today's program, and we'll see you tomorrow.